Chaos erupted in a federal courtroom this morning as attorney Pam Bondi unveiled explosive evidence of corruption against the very judge presiding over her case. What started as a heated ethics hearing quickly spiraled into a legal firestorm. The courtroom was packed, every seat taken, every aisle lined with murmurs and anticipation. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the tension was thick enough to slice with a gavel. Attorney Pam Bondi stood tall, dressed in a crisp navy suit, her expression unreadable as she adjusted her notes. On the bench, Judge Raymond Kessler, known for his biting demeanor, iron fist rulings, and an ego that filled every inch of his courtroom. Bondi had come to argue a high-stakes government ethics case, implicating several unnamed officials in a string of covert financial cover-ups and backdoor deals. But the moment she opened her mouth to deliver her opening statement, Kessler leaned forward and struck like a viper. "Miss Bondi," he said with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, "if you plan to waste this court's time with half-baked conspiracy theories, I suggest you take your drama to a podcast." There was a ripple of awkward laughter. Bondi didn't flinch. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she replied, her voice even, "the facts speak louder than your sarcasm." Kessler's eyes narrowed. He tapped his pen against the bench with deliberate rhythm, a warning cloaked in civility. But she continued, methodically, purposefully. She laid out the groundwork: whistleblower testimonies, forged procurement logs, and phone records that didn't match official timelines. As the hours passed, it became clear. This wasn't a spectacle. This was a case built on precision, and Pam Bondi wasn't here to play. Kessler's interruptions grew more frequent, more venomous. "You're grasping at shadows," he barked, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Do you even understand the gravity of what you're insinuating?" "I do," Bondi said, pausing. "Do you?" gasps. "Subtle, but present." He glared at her, lips drawn into a thin line. Then, in a tone dripping with disdain, he snapped, "You're dangerously close to contempt. Counsel." The courtroom turned ice cold. But Bondi didn't waver. She knew what was at stake. This wasn't about ego. This wasn't even about the case on paper. There was something deeper, a rot in the system. And she was done waiting for permission to dig it out. By midday, the tension had reached a breaking point. Every time she introduced new evidence, Kessler batted it down with procedural red tape. Every time a witness supported her claims, he questioned their credibility before cross-examination. It wasn't just aggressive, it was surgical, calculated, almost personal. And then came the moment. Pam reached for a sealed envelope. "I request the court's permission to submit this final piece of evidence into the record," she said, holding it up. "A recording made on March 9th of this year by a confidential informant." Judge Kessler's eyes flickered, just for a second. But it was there, the first crack in the mask. "You will not introduce unverified recordings into this courtroom," he said sharply. "I move for a closed session review," Bondi said calmly, placing the envelope on the evidence tray. "You will not, Miss Bondi." Kessler's voice boomed now. "One more stunt like this, and I will hold you in contempt." "Then do it," she said. A hush fell over the courtroom. Kessler froze. Bondi looked him dead in the eye. "Do it, Your Honor. But first, perhaps you should listen to what's on that tape, because I believe you'll recognize your own voice." Dead silence. No one moved. Even the bailiff stiffened. Kessler didn't speak. His jaw clenched so tight his cheek twitched. Pam gestured to the court technician. "Please play the recording." The audio began to roll. It was grainy at first, like most secret recordings. A muffled conversation. Then clearer. "Make sure those files disappear. She can't trace it back to me. Do you understand?" Another voice responded, hesitant. And then, Judge Kessler's voice. "If Bondi pushes this, we bury her in procedures. Delay, discredit, disqualify. I'll handle it from the bench." The room erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. The defense team looked like they'd been slapped. One juror dropped his notepad. Judge Kessler sat motionless, face pale, mouth slightly open. "This is outrageous," he finally barked, but it was too late. The courtroom doors opened again, this time not for lawyers. Federal marshals entered, fast and quiet, flanking the room like wolves. A senior agent approached the bench. "Judge Raymond Kessler, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to suppress legal proceedings. Stand and place your hands behind your back." Stunned silence. Kessler stood, trembling with rage. "You can't do this. I am the law in this courtroom." "No," Pam Bondi said quietly. "Not anymore. They cuffed him right there." Cameras caught him being led out through the side door, face twisted in disbelief. His gavel left on the bench, symbolic, abandoned. But the chaos didn't end there. As whispers turned to open chatter, the question echoed from one corner of the courtroom to the next. If the judge was in on it, how deep does the corruption go? Pam Bondi watched it all, unreadable, once again. She'd cracked the first layer. But this wasn't the end. This was just the breach. And what waited on the other side? That would be even darker. As the heavy doors of the courtroom slammed shut behind the arrested Judge Kessler, the silence inside wasn't relief. It was recoil. The air was brittle, electrified, full of 1,000 unasked questions. Faces turned. To Pam Bondi, some wide-eyed in disbelief, others skeptical, even accusatory, but none indifferent. The moment was seismic. Bondi didn't bask in the spectacle. She remained locked in that moment of stillness, the fallout humming around her. The first domino had fallen, but she'd always known that exposing Kessler would be only the start. She picked up her notes, calm as ever, and turned to the panel of oversight attorneys hastily summoned when the courtroom imploded into national news. "Now," she said, adjusting the mic, "if we're done pretending justice lives in this courtroom, I'd like to proceed." The new presiding authority was a woman named Judge Maritza Holloway, pulled in from an emergency rotation. Her face betrayed the storm she'd just walked into. She glanced at the marshals, at the empty bench where Kessler had sat just moments ago, then fixed her eyes on Bondi. "You'll proceed. But tread carefully, counsel," she said. "Everything that happens from this point forward will be under federal review." Pam gave the faintest nod. She stepped back into the spotlight and exhaled. "Your Honor, with Kessler's arrest, it is now appropriate to reveal that he was not merely obstructing justice in this case. He was a central figure in the very conspiracy we are trying to dismantle." She clicked the remote in her hand. The courtroom screens flickered to life. A digital evidence board emerged. Dossiers, encrypted communications, wire transfers spanning offshore accounts in Malta, Zurich, and the Caymans. Pam began threading the needle piece by piece, showing how a coalition of public officials, some still unnamed, had funneled state contracts to shell corporations under the oversight of judicial enablers. At least 4 contracts totaling over $160 million were awarded without competitive bidding, she said, her voice rising with the weight of her words. Signed off under Kessler's judicial discretion. The money disappeared, and with it, so did the accountability. The tension was back, hotter now, louder. From the back of the room, a man in a gray suit stood abruptly. Eyes turned to him. He was tall, well-groomed, but not panicked, just furious. "Objection," he called out, even though this wasn't his court. "This is a political witch hunt. My name is Gordon Pell, and I represent several of the officials being slandered in this courtroom." Judge Holloway glared at him. "Mr. Pell, you are not counsel of record in this matter. Sit down or be removed." Pell didn't move. "The only crime being committed here is the hijacking of our legal system by a woman with a vendetta." Pam tilted her head. "Funny, I was just about to play your voice on the next recording." That landed like a brick. Pell didn't sit down. He turned and left, his pace controlled, but his posture was that of a man retreating. Pam let the moment linger, then clicked again. New audio played. It was a conversation between Pell and Kessler, 2 weeks before the trial. "Bondi's tenacious," Pell's voice said. "She has witnesses we didn't anticipate." "Discredit her," came Kessler's reply. "Use the media. Dig up anything. If she brings that case into my court, she won't leave with it intact." The room stirred. Even the stenographer paused for half a beat before resuming her rapid typing. But the audio continued. It cut to another speaker. This one sounded panicked. "I told you she's closing in on the Zurich account. If she gets those logs..." The feed cut. Pam looked up. "I have 4 more recordings. They implicate not just judicial figures, but sitting legislators and at least 2 high-ranking federal advisors." Judge Holloway leaned forward. "You have their names?" Pam nodded. "Yes, but before I disclose them publicly, I want protective orders in place. I've received threats. My team has been followed. I don't know who's watching or listening anymore, but I know this. We're not just dealing with corruption. We're dealing with a system designed to protect it." The room was no longer silent. It was buzzing. No one coughed. No one shifted. No one breathed louder than they had to. Judge Holloway looked grim. "We'll reconvene in an hour," she said. "Court is in recess. Counsel, stay close." Pam gathered her materials quickly, then stepped out into the hallway. But she didn't make it far. A hand gripped her arm, firm but not violent. It was Special Agent Darnell Briggs, FBI. "We need to talk. Now." He ushered her into a side conference room and locked the door behind them. "I need to know exactly what you're planning to expose next," Briggs said. "Because if it's what I think it is, you're in deeper than you realize." Pam narrowed her eyes. "Are you here to protect me, Agent, or stop me?" Briggs hesitated. "Both, if necessary." She set her files on the table and looked him in the eye. "Then let's be honest. You already know who's next on that list, don't you?" Briggs didn't answer. Pam slid a folder across the table. "Page 2, 4th name down." He opened it. His jaw tensed. "That's a sitting cabinet member." "Yes," Pam said. "And he's had direct financial ties to Kessler for over a decade. I've traced campaign donations, overseas property transfers, and undisclosed meetings in Prague and Ankara." Briggs closed the file. "You understand this goes beyond an ethics trial now, right?" he said. "This is a matter of national security. You've just stepped into something with consequences you can't predict." Pam's stare didn't falter. "That's why I'm not stepping out." A beat of silence. Then, Briggs pulled out a flash drive from his coat pocket and slid it toward her. "Encrypted. One-time access. Use it wisely. But if you leak this before the Bureau is ready, they won't just come after the people on your list. They'll come after you." Pam picked it up without hesitation. "Let them." She stood, headed for the door, then paused. "Agent Briggs, when this case explodes, and it will, just remember who chose the right side." He gave a single nod. Outside, the hallway was already teeming with press. Microphones, flashbulbs, security detail forming a perimeter. Pam stepped back into the light, knowing every move from here would be televised, dissected, twisted. But none of that mattered. She had evidence. She had names. And most importantly, she had momentum. But something still gnawed at her. Judge Kessler hadn't acted alone. And the next piece of the puzzle? He was already in the building. Pam Bondi stood frozen for a moment outside the conference room door, her breath calm, eyes sharp. Beyond the layers of reporters and security, she spotted him. Senator Langston Meyer, tall, unflinching. His silver hair combed to perfection, his navy suit as crisp as his lies. He didn't flinch under the gaze of the press, nor did he shy from the whispers that had begun swirling like a hurricane gathering force. But Bondi wasn't watching the spectacle. She was watching him. And what she saw wasn't confidence. It was calculation, the kind only a man used to steering storms could wield. He gave her a small, almost cordial nod. She didn't return it. Moments later, the courtroom reconvened. The noise outside didn't die. It was muffled thunder now, but inside, the air was vacuumed tight, electric, and expectant. Judge Holloway retook her seat. The bailiff gave a terse nod to Pam, signaling that her request for security protections had been approved. U.S. Marshals now stood in each corner of the courtroom. Pam rose slowly, walking with intent to the center floor. She placed the flash drive from Agent Briggs into the court's encrypted evidence reader. "I'll make this very clear," she began. "The case you've all witnessed unfold is not an isolated scandal. It is a part of a systemic operation designed to manipulate contracts, suppress whistleblowers, and weaponize our courts." She clicked. The screen behind her came to life. Wire transfers. A grid of names connected by red lines. Offshore accounts, foreign travel logs. Then, a photo of Senator Langston Meyer exiting a black car outside an embassy in Ankara. Another showing him shaking hands with an energy executive, currently under international investigation. The final image. Senator Meyer and Judge Kessler, seated at a private fundraiser at a villa in Lake Como, one that had never appeared on Meyer's official travel itinerary. Gasps rippled through the room. Pam turned back to face the gallery. "This is not a conspiracy theory. This is evidence, and it was never supposed to see the light of day. Your Honor," she said, looking to Holloway, "I formally move to open a federal corruption inquiry into Senator Langston Meyer." The courtroom erupted. Senator Meyer stood slowly, face composed, voice as smooth as ever. "This is outrageous," he said with a faint smile. "You're exploiting the removal of a disgraced judge to further a political hit job. Your case relies on illegally obtained evidence and desperate speculation." Pam didn't blink. "Then, refute it. Under oath." A pause. The senator's jaw tightened. Judge Holloway adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. "Given the seriousness of the allegations and the strength of the preliminary evidence, I am issuing an emergency subpoena for Senator Meyer to testify now. You are not above the law, Senator." Meyer's composure cracked for the first time. His eyes darted toward his legal aide. A whisper, a nod. But there was nowhere to run. The doors were shut, guarded. Cameras in the hallway were already broadcasting to every major outlet in the country. The story had detonated, and Meyer, once untouchable, was now caged by the same system he'd spent decades rigging. An hour later, Meyer sat on the witness stand, hand raised, jaw tight. Pam stood across from him, the room silent, the audience hanging on every word. "Senator Meyer," she said, "you authorized the redirection of over $70 million in infrastructure funds to shell corporations tied to foreign oil interests. These redirections were approved under fast-tracked judicial reviews by Judge Kessler. Is that correct?" Meyer sneered. "That's a gross mischaracterization." "Is it incorrect?" "I was advised by counsel." Pam stepped forward. "Did that counsel include Judge Kessler?" He hesitated. "Answer the question." He stared at her, and for the first time looked cornered. "Yes," he said finally. Quiet, but audible. Pam held his gaze. No further questions. Judge Holloway's gavel struck the bench. "In light of this testimony and the corroborating evidence, I am authorizing immediate action. Senator Langston Meyer is to be taken into custody, pending formal indictment for conspiracy, corruption, and misuse of public office." The courtroom watched, jaws slack, as marshals moved swiftly. Meyer didn't resist. He stood, turned, and let them cuff him. Another fallen titan. The fallout came fast. News agencies across the country broke the story within seconds. Screens lit up in Times Square. Live footage ran across networks as Senator Meyer was led out of the courthouse in silence. Inside, Pam gathered her documents slowly. A junior attorney leaned in, whispering, "You just dismantled an empire." She offered no smile, just a firm nod. "We've only cleared the first layer." But she knew what this meant. Not just another conviction. Not just another name. This was the point of rupture. A moment people would remember, not for the scandal, but for the shift. For the fact that someone didn't back down. That someone pushed through contempt, ridicule, and systemic sabotage. And won. That night, a press conference was held on the courthouse steps. Pam stood at the podium, floodlights burning, microphones clustered like a bouquet of demand. "I didn't come here to play politics," she said. "I came to uphold the law, and I will continue to do that, no matter who stands in the way, whether they wear a robe, a pin, or a smile." The crowd roared. Reporters shouted questions one after another. "Ms. Bondi, what happens now?" She paused. "Now?" she said. "Now we clean house." The next weeks saw a flood of resignations. Investigations spiraled outward like cracks in glass. Federal review boards launched inquiries into judicial appointments. A special counsel was named. And for the first time in years, the public saw consequence, not just scandal. Pam Bondi didn't return to private practice. Instead, she was appointed special prosecutor for government integrity. It wasn't about power. It was about the principle. She took her seat behind a new desk. Different office. Same mission. A reporter's voice played on the television behind her as she opened the first file of a new case. Following the stunning courtroom revelation that brought down a sitting judge and a senior senator, Pam Bondi has become a symbol, not of vengeance, but of justice. And the system, finally, seems to be listening. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Pam was already reading, already working, because the rot was deep. But justice had a spine now, and her name was Bondi.